How do you build your minimum viable product for success? If you've been in the startup game for some time, you've probably heard of the term MVP, minimum viable product. Today, we're going to look at how do you build your MVP for success, some of the do's and don'ts as you go through this period, because it is a critical step. I'm Arya Chitasi, the director of Engenesis Ventures, where we've worked with over 500 startups to grow and scale. And in these videos, we share with you those insights so that you can level up in your entrepreneurship journey. Now, today we're going through this whole concept around MVP. First, let's jump into a quick definition of what exactly an MVP is, in case you haven't seen that before. Now, from the book, The Lean Startup, which is, in my opinion, one of the must-reads if you're a startup founder, it says this: a minimum viable product helps entrepreneurs start the process of learning as quickly as possible. It is not necessarily the smallest product imaginable, though it is simply the fastest way to get through the build, measure, learn feedback loop with the minimum amount of effort. So what you want to look at with building your MVP, you want to look at what's the core value proposition that you're bringing to your customers. And this brings us to our first topic, which we call the product hook here at Engenesis. Now, your core product hook is the first coat hanger that you're going to hang off the rail. It's the thing that's going to bring your customer in. If you're not clear about the core pain that you're dealing with, the problem that you're addressing, and really bringing that customer in and serving them, then it's going to be, again, very difficult for you to keep building more and more features. So now, what do we mean by the product hook? Let me give you a real live example from the business accounting software Xero. So if you haven't heard of Xero, Xero is a widely used business accounting software that really played a huge role in digitizing the accounting software. And they took a very key design-led approach. They really cared about their users and the other human beings that they were serving. And they did it by sitting there and viewing what business owners did each and every morning when they went to manage their businesses. And what they found was that they would open their bank accounts, it would be 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. They would open their bank accounts and that they would see that, hey, who paid me last night, right? Because they wanted to get that little hit of dopamine going, all of this hard work is paying off. And then they would go and reconcile manually their bank account with, their invoices or, their other software or bookkeeping. So this was one of the key product hooks that Xero used. They went to get feeds from banks for all of the transactions so that you could open up their software, see the transaction which loaded from last night, and then automatically start reconciling your books. So why I bring this up was this was a really key product hook that was central to so many features that were to come. You see, later on, they allowed people to do profit and loss reports and balance sheet reporting. They allowed them to do payroll. They allowed them to do forecasting. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the key is they found the one little thing that really could hook their customer, that then all of the other coat hangers could be added onto. One huge mistake we see with a lot of startups is they come in and they go, I'm building something that it's a little bit like Instagram, it is a little bit like Facebook, it has a whole marketplace like Amazon. And literally what they're doing is they're trying to compete with these other trillion-dollar companies from day one. And they don't realize just how much work is involved, right? So even building 3 features in your product, we typically say to our early founders, 3 to 5 features is all you need for your minimum viable product in order to hook someone and then start learning about their usage. In the early days of Facebook, one of the main reasons Peter Thiel, the key investor in Facebook at that time, joined the company was because even though MySpace and a lot of these other social media platforms had more users, Facebook had a large percentage of their users logging in each and every day. So this is what we mean by product hook. You want to get something that really makes a difference to the users. It doesn't have to be lots of features, many can come later, but in your minimum viable product, you better be able to articulate this and embed it in those core number of features. Another mistake I'll say about creating an MVP is if you are thinking your main value is going to be having a lower price than your competitors, I would really invite you to go in and check like what is the problem that you're solving? What is the pain point that you're addressing? You see, take a company like Walmart in the United States, right? They have like hundreds of, just so many stores, but it's because of their huge scale, they are able to bring their prices down so much, right? So there's a lot of infrastructure so that their business model can, turn into this lower price to the consumer. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they come in and they think that, I'm just going to bring my price down and everyone will use my product. But that's really a catch-22. You then don't have enough money to pay for the development of the product and it's not sustainable. So instead, we would really recommend that you want to go in and see, what's the burning pain that you can address that, for example, is quite an expensive pain for people. It could be something where people are losing a lot of money if they don't address that. It could be something that's so emotionally intense that they just really want to get that solved. So just, check in on yourself. If you're diving in and you're just thinking that you're going to build some simple features and just bring the price down, in general, this is not a pattern that works unless you have a very clear vision how you're going to produce that product or that service at a much lower rate, like having a type of special technology or a certain makeup before you push that out to your users. Now, the next key component is validation. When you are building a startup and you've got an idea, many people come in going like, this is my big idea and it's such an intelligent idea, and then they end up putting too much risk and overexposing themselves in their startup. We want to remember that your idea is at best an assumption and it needs to be tested, validated, and refined. Before starting your minimum viable product, you may want to go in and try non-product ways to validate your product. What do I mean by non-product ways? It could be, for example, a service, right? So you could try to address the same issue by doing that thing as a service, right? So for example, in some of the early days of these different, Menulog and Deliveroo, these types of companies, some of the early companies, they actually put up people's menus. They got people to order online, but then they would literally be in the back end and they would call those restaurants to make and go and get that food, and then they would deliver it manually. So this is a great example of using non-product methods, like, doing it as a service, or, for example, sometimes doing things in a spreadsheet and so on. These are very powerful methods on a tight budget or sometimes no budget at all to validate that service is even worthwhile. And especially if you can generate revenue at this stage, even better. You've proven that someone's willing to pay for that solution in the marketplace. So this is key because I'll link one of my articles below, which references studies that when they've done a post-mortem of why startups fail, it ended up being, in some cases, 42% of the startups ended up having no market need once they built their product. So can you imagine spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars building a product, you chuck it out there and you find out no one needs it? Well, unfortunately, this is happening with a vast majority of startup founders. So the next component is from the product hook, you want to see what it will take to keep customers coming back, to keep users coming back. This is the base of your user traction. Sometimes people are so focused on getting people in, but they're not thinking about why are they going to stay. Some studies even show that over 3 months of someone downloading your app, only 20% will, hold your app and keep using it. So you want to be with the reality of how competitive it is to even be one of the apps, on someone's phone, on someone's device that they're going to use regularly. One book that we would recommend it's called Hooked, and it goes through how companies like Facebook and Google and so on, they use this habitual loop for people looking at what type of triggers you experience in your environment, and then they look to be your number one solution, that when you have that trigger, that you come back into that app. We definitely recommend start looking at that, because this is going to be the basis of what's called your lifetime value of your customers. How do you give your customers value over time, and then hopefully be able to monetize that as things progress. So this is what we've seen working with many startups, how to focus on building a successful MVP. This is though another question we get a lot is, should I do it on the cheap, right? Like should I really invest some decent funds and effort in building my MVP, or should I go extremely lean and build something for a very small amount of money? And this is where we would invite you to distinguish between what we call a disposable MVP and then your scalable MVP. Your scalable MVP, it's you building the first version of your product. It might have between 3 to 5 features on it, but the difference is that it's got the base infrastructure that you can stack on top of it, grow on top of it more and more. It's going to be the thing that serves millions and millions of users. You're not going to have to chuck it away. The disposable MVP, on the other hand, is something you build, and at some point, it's not going to be able to maintain the load of all of those additional users. Now, whether that means that you can't add certain features to it, or it might mean the infrastructure is such that once you hit 100,000 users using it each day, it's just not going to work. For example, some people use these types of no code, these drag and drop tools or something for $30, and then they make an app. These tools are really great, but you want to acknowledge that you're building a disposable MVP that is not going to be able to carry you through to become, a highly valued company. They do have their place, as you can see, sometimes they're very important, but it's just key. It's a key to distinguish that. And particularly investors, in most cases can read that when they would go through your product as well. If you are one of the people who have had so many ideas about all of these different features, and yes, you want it to look like Instagram as well as Facebook as well as Amazon, we invite you to look at first that product hook. What's going to be the one or very few features that will hook your customer, get them to keep coming back? And then you want to start creating your product roadmap, the different versions, right? What's your 1.0 of your product? 1.1, 1.2. Maybe you even want to plan out version 2, 3, 4, and 5. But you want to start coming up with a medium to long-term plan about how you're going to initially hook your customer and then keep building upon that. I mean, that is how you can sustainably grow your product, and also, not over-invest at any particular stage. Fantastic. Now, finally, this whole mentality of what I've gone through with you here that works for your minimum viable product, you need to keep it in mind as you keep going. We've also seen great startups. They started with an extraordinary MVP. They got paying customers, but then as they went to select their next set of features, it's like they just forgot all of these lessons, and then they ended up building things that really didn't grow their company. There was one that, they spent 8 months building all of these features and released it. They weren't validated, their customers hated it, and then they ended up chucking away all of that development. So keep this in mind, not only for your minimum viable product, but what we call your minimum viable progression. You need to keep taking each step with this same intentionality and conscious, decision making. Fantastic. So if you got value from this video, we would love to hear how you're applying it into your business or what you're grappling with in the comments below. By clicking subscribe, it gives us a good indication that you're getting value and we can bring more of these videos to you. Here's to you growing your business leaner, faster, and with less risk. I'll see you next time.